Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Live Ones College Football Preview. And, well, the time has come. It's time to tackle the big two of college football, the two sides of the Cold War that, as we're seeing literally as we speak, is not going to last in the Cold War phase too much longer. Today, we're going to examine one of the sides of the coming conflict that's likely going to effectively end the NCAA itself, frankly, I think. Home to 16 teams and God knows how many more in a couple of years, the Big Ten. If you're an old-time baseball fan, you might remember the famous manager Billy Martin, famous for a ridiculously unconventional strategy on the field, bending the letter of the rulebook to its absolute limit at all times. It was said that he came up with the crazy things he had his players and his teams do because he spent his entire life in a state of complete paranoia and just wanted to preempt any possible shenanigans being done to him. So he just imagined all the various possible ways the rules could be turned against him and made sure he was the one who did the bigger things first. That's the sense that I got of the Big Ten's reaction to the SEC's power play of bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. There was this sense of urgency, the need for survival. They knew that if they let that act of aggression stand, every other conference was going to fade away like the Big 12 looked very much like it was going to last year. So they gathered together the ACC and the Pac-12, and they announced a scheduling alliance with the writing on the wall. The College Football Playoff and the College Basketball Selection Committee like strength of schedule. Make any more moves like you just did, and you will be completely shut out of meaningful out-of-conference college games. We thought that was the Neville Chamberlain this far, no farther approach. Oh, no. Big Ten went all Winston Churchill up in here. Stole USC and UCLA away from the Pac-12 when it became clear just how bad a financial situation that conference was in. Then negotiated itself, just had this happen, a $7 billion media rights deal that included every single other major sports provider in America except for the SEC's media partner, ESPN. The Big Ten is now officially more financially viable than the conference that has dominated all college football for the last 40 years. This is an all-out war for football supremacy, prestige, media ratings, and money, money, money. And lost in all this hoopla, they've still got a season of college football to play. We've got 14 teams to cover, including the runner-up to the national championship last year. How is everyone going to fare in 2022? Let's take a deep dive and find out. Illinois, the Illini's first season under Brett Bielema was a mixed bag, to say the least. 5-7, their offense was virtually non-existent. Their defense was a beast, and they had 4 wins in conference play, including against the number 7 team in the country in Penn State. You just never knew what you were getting week to week with these guys. Tommy DeVito is coming in from Syracuse to play quarterback after Art Sikowski spent the year doing Art Sikowski things before getting hurt. The running backs are sneaky good. Chase Brown ran for over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. Josh McCray is a good backup, and you got some other options in the mix there. The defense was awesome, considering there's not a lot of individual standouts. It allowed just 22 points a game last year, 29th best in the nation. Fifth-year starter safety Sidney Brown is going to be the veteran leader of the group. He made 83 tackles last year to get up to 262 career stops with a sack, 4 interceptions, 13 broken-up passes, and 3 forced fumbles in his career. This team is so hard to forecast. Their defense was so good and their offense so bad last year that a lot of their wins and losses could have gone either way. They'll beat Wyoming and Chattanooga for sure. They should lose to Iowa, Michigan State, and Michigan. Other than that, it's a whole lot of toss-ups. I think the Northwestern game at the end of the year might determine whether or not they go to a bowl game. 5-7 or 6-6 this year. Indiana. Wow, that was not what we thought after that 2020 season, huh? 2-10. We saw just how reliant this team was on their quarterback when he went down. Now Michael Penix Jr. is off to Washington, and the Hoosiers have announced that they're not going to name a starter before week 1. Says to me that they know that this year is going to be closer to 2021 than it was to 2020. Basically, the entire offense is getting a redo through the transfer portal. The receiving core lost Ty Freifogel, that's a tongue twister of a name, and leading receiver tight end Peyton Hendershot. Most of the top backs are gone, but in comes Sean Shivers from Auburn and Josh Henderson from North Carolina. The offensive line has 3 new starters. I'm not optimistic about the Hoosiers' offense. The defense was the worst in the Big Ten overall, couldn't get to the quarterback and couldn't generate turnovers. There are 4 brand new starters coming in through the transfer portal, so we're going to see how they all work out. But again, you can't fix what was wrong with Indiana in a single offseason. Schedule-wise, at least they get to miss Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota from the West, but they are in the Big Ten East, the single most stacked division in all of college football. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, and Purdue should all be losses. Rutgers is a 50-50 toss-up when it's in New Brunswick, where they're generally much better. Cincinnati is also on their schedule again, and I don't like their chances there either. This is a 3-9 team at best this year. Iowa, man, I had such high hopes. I really did. This team looked so good right up until the Purdue game, and then we saw just how good Purdue was. Even so, they stomped everyone in the West, and you can hardly blame them for losing the Big Ten title game to a Michigan team that exceeded all expectations and went to the national championship game. What Texas and Oklahoma are to defense is what Iowa is to offense. They grind it out little by little, classic Big Ten style, and let the defense be the star of the team. Star running back Tyler Goodson is gone, but Gavin Williams is next in line, and he was able to get on the field a little bit last year with 305 yards. The defense was a classic Hawkeyes defense, finished 9th in the nation in yards allowed, gave up just 20 points a game, and it came up with lots and lots of turnovers. The secondary welcomes back their ball-hawking star corner Riley Moss after he missed some time hurt last season with a knee injury. Just having him on the field is going to make the secondary that came up with an incredible 25 interceptions in 14 games last year even better. You got ends Lucas Van Ness and Joe Evans. They combined for 14 sacks, and even with the loss of Zach Van Valkenburg, who led the team with 14 tackles for loss, the line's going to hold up. In the linebacking core, Jack Campbell and Seth Benson are both back. They combined for over 250 tackles last year. There's not a single hole in this defense. The running game just needs to get 21 points, and the Hawkeyes are going to win almost every game this year. And they're certainly going to run roughshod over the West again. Their out-of-conference games are a cakewalk. Just leaves the East states against Rutgers, Michigan, and Ohio State. Rutgers isn't doing shit to them. Michigan's going to be a fun defensive rock fight. It always is, called a 50-50 toss-up. Ohio State on the road, got to make that a loss. So 10-2 or 11-1, easily winning the West again. We know the drill by now. The Maryland Terrapins just barely made it to a bowl game after a devastating second half with a win over Rutgers in the last week of the season. The Terps beat the crap out of bad teams and got the crap kicked out of them by the good ones. There really wasn't a middle ground. Overall, Maryland was 4th in the Big Ten in total and scoring offense, was 13th in the nation in passing, and the offensive line really held up well in pass protection, which gave Talia Tagovailoa let him really find his groove last year. He threw for 26 touchdowns and close to 4,000 yards. Now he's the unquestioned number one guy. He's the unquestioned quarterback. He's got the targets to do even more. Raheem Jarrett led the way with 62 catches. Dante Demas is one of the Big Ten's most dangerous weapons. And you're getting Jacob Copeland out of the transfer portal from Florida, who caught 85 passes and 9 touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. Gives you another deep threat. This team really doesn't have a running game, but it doesn't really need one when everything's clicking that well through the air. The offensive line returns all 5 starters. Like I said, these guys were really great in pass protection. Tagovailoa didn't have to take a whole lot of sacks last year. I really don't think points are going to be the problem with this team, but Maryland was arguably the worst defense of the Big Ten overall. It's kind of them and Indiana. It's kind of a toss-up between them who had the worst defense. And a lot of the guys who had experience are gone now. So this is a team that's going to get beat up a lot on the line and on the big plays. It's just the way these things work out. The good news is they get a lot of teams on their schedule this year without much in the way of offenses. Buffalo, Charlotte, Northwestern, Rutgers. Those are 4 teams they should beat. Rutgers, they're always dangerous with how much they take the ball away, but I give the edge to Maryland on that one. It might be a situation like last year where the win over Rutgers in the last game of the season is what puts them into a bowl game. SMU is going to be a 50-50 shootout. Purdue's likely going to be 50-50. And it's the Big Ten, so of course they're going to steal a win against somebody they shouldn't. 6 wins and a bowl is a safe bet for this team. So after losing to Georgia 34-11 in the national title game, Jim Harbaugh said that this was all just the beginning for Michigan. Of that, I have some doubts because they lost some absolutely irreplaceable stars on both sides of the ball that made even getting there, even beating Ohio State and Iowa and winning the Big Ten to get into the playoff, they made that possible. Second overall draft pick Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo accounted for 25 of the team's 34 sacks. The next man up on the edge is Taylor Upshaw, who had 2. 3 of the starting 4 secondary players are off to the NFL as well. It's Michigan, so they have an excellent recruiting pipeline like they always do. But this is not going to be the number 16 defense in the country this year. Quarterbacks are going to have more time to throw. Receivers are going to be able to get better looks. This is a team that's going to be brought back down off the pedestal in 2022. On the offensive side of the ball, it'll probably be Caden McNamara back under center. He was fine under center, classic 6 or 7 yards at a time, dink and dunk passer. He wasn't the offense. Hassan Haskins was, and he's a Tennessee Titan now. He accounted for exactly half of this team's offensive touchdowns, 20 out of the 40 they scored all year long. Blake Corum is up next at running back, and he can run. Don't get me wrong, he'll ball out this year, but it's just really hard for any one person to fill those kinds of shoes. The out-of-conference schedule is as soft as can be, and they get to miss Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Purdue from the West. They get Maryland, Nebraska, Rutgers, Indiana, and Illinois as easy wins. I think Ohio State's going to beat them this year without their two monsters on defense. They can never beat Michigan State for whatever reason, and every Iowa game is at best a 50-50 no matter how good you are. 9-3 is a good bet for this year. You can't really expect a repeat of last year after everything they lost in the offseason. Michigan State did so much better than expected behind the 1,700 all-purpose yards of out-of-nowhere sensation transfer running back from Wake Forest and current Seattle Seahawk Kenneth Walker. Walker not only set the Big Ten on fire with his running ability alone, he made other teams sell out to the play action on every single passing down and opened quarterback Peyton Thorne up for 27 touchdowns to only 10 picks. The result was an offense that was uncharacteristically high-producing for a Big Ten team that wasn't Ohio State, 39th in the country overall, and they needed it because their defense got absolutely walloped anytime they played a good offense. The team went 11-2. They damn near won the Big Ten East, but for Michigan beating Ohio State, and won a very fun Peach Bowl over the Kenny Pickett-led Pittsburgh. But, like we said, Walker very wisely entered the NFL draft and is now a Seattle Seahawk. There's some reworking to do with a few key lost starters, and the depth needs to be developed. 8 players are coming in through the transfer portal and have the potential to be new starters on defense. The secondary in particular needs it because it's got to be night and day better, and it starts with getting Amir Speed from Georgia for one of the corner spots. The grad transfer didn't get on the field a lot for the Bulldogs, but he made the most of the time that he was there. He got 25 tackles and 24 appearances during his career. I just don't think that it's possible for this to be an 11-win team again. The centerpiece of their team that made all of their success last year possible is gone, and there's no one to replace him. Mel Tucker is patching the holes in his lineup via the transfer portal while he waits for his new recruiting classes to bear fruit. Plus, the schedule is so much harder than last year. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Minnesota at home for sure, but they're at Michigan, at Penn State, at Maryland, at Illinois, at Washington for their out-of-conference game. I think this drops back to an 8-4 team this year. They'll still beat someone they shouldn't. Probably Michigan. They usually do. Minnesota. How about the Golden Gophers? 9-4 overall. I think it's safe to say 2019 wasn't a fluke. This program is for real now under PJ Fleck. The rebuild has borne so much fruit. But they did lose to Bowling Green, and that's just something a program that has this reputation now just can't do. It's crazy to imagine what this team would have been last year if Muhammad Ibrahim didn't go down with an Achilles injury. Just look at how he was making mincemeat out of the Ohio State defense in that opening game, week 1. This year is his canvas to paint with. The offense will most likely all run around him. I have a feeling that if he can stay healthy, he might be one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, which by definition would make him one of the best running backs in the country. He can punch his ticket to the NFL with a career year this season. The defense was fantastic. It finished first in the Big Ten and third in the nation, allowing 279 yards and just 17 points a game. The pass defense was great. The production against the run was even better. They lost a lot of key pieces on the line from last season, but they've got a great transfer coming in from Clemson in the form of Darnell Jeffries to help patch the holes. The linebacking core is solid with second leading tackler Mariano Sori-Marin back, and the secondary was always one of the best parts of this team last year and gets most of its important starters back. Schedule-wise, this team should be right up there in the mix with Iowa to compete for the Big Ten West. They have a cakewalk of an out-of-conference schedule. There's no Michigan, no Ohio State from the East. At Penn State and at Michigan State are their hardest games. Obviously, the Wisconsin game always has the rivalry element, but I think they're the better team this year. What it's all going to come down to is the Iowa game on November 19th. The Gophers have lost 9 out of their last 10 against Iowa, and Iowa's always a beast of an opponent. It's likely going to be, a 13-10 or a 10-7 grind fest, classic Big Ten West. But I'm ranking it as a 50-50 toss-up. Whoever wins that game should win the West. I think this Gophers team can definitely win 9 games again. I think that's their floor. Nebraska. Is there any program with a history of success like Nebraska that gives any head coach brought in to turn the program around because years of 9-3 and 10-2 ball weren't enough for them? Any coach that gets more leeway than Scott Frost. 15-29 in 4 years with 4 straight division finishes of 5th or worse. This program is one of the ones Rutgers and Maryland fans point to when people say that they're not Big Ten quality programs. But Nebraska has to keep doubling down on the hire because it's Scott Frost, and his record at Oregon and UCF says he has to be getting close to turning things around sooner or later. The Cornhuskers did everything on offense last year except score. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. Tons of yards, tons of big plays, but very little points to show for it. And now Scott Frost's handpicked quarterback, Adrian Martinez, is gone. Enter Casey Thompson. Started 10 games for Texas last season and led the Big 12 with 24 touchdown passes while passing for 2,100 yards and completing 63% of his attempts. Not a bad choice, honestly. The receivers should be stronger with home run hitters Trey Palmer from LSU and Marcus Washington from Texas coming in to give Thompson some good targets to throw the ball to. The Huskers just have to generate more big plays on defense. They came up with just 12 turnovers last year. They were among the worst in the Big Ten in sacks, and there just weren't enough stops on third down. They're hoping to get some help in the secondary in Tommy Hill from Arizona State and Northern Iowa cornerback Omar Brown. Honestly, it couldn't be that much worse than last year. Schedule-wise, you just don't win in the Big Ten without a stout defense that can get you through the rock fights, particularly in the West. If Nebraska is going to get back to a winning season, it has to load up on the winnable games early. Northwestern, North Dakota, Georgia Southern, Indiana, Rutgers, and Illinois are all 50-50 toss-ups. Because the Final Four, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa are going to kill them on the defensive side of the ball. 7-5, I think, is this team's absolute ceiling. 6-6 is a bowl game, and a bowl game would be more realistic. Northwestern probably disappointed more than any team in the conference besides Indiana last year. Bad defense, worse offense, and just another 3-9 season with a team that didn't score more than 14 points in 7 out of their last 8 games. There's not even anyone worth mentioning coming back on this team on offense. There rarely is. Pat Fitzgerald is classic Big Ten West, all defense, no offense, always has been. The offense just has to average 4 yards a play, and it failed to do that last year, which is why it lost so many games. The defense didn't generate any pressure. It was the second worst in the Big Ten overall, and it was totally miserable against the run with the worst production in the conference. When you're giving up 6 yards a play and your offense is gaining 3 yards a play, you're going to lose every game. This team has some pieces on defense. Adetomiwa Adebawore anchors the line. He was honorable mention all-conference last year with 95 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 5 broken-up passes in his last 3 seasons. Bryce Gallagher is a great piece at middle linebacker with 72 tackles, a sack, and 4 tackles for loss last season, but it's a group that just needs an overhaul in general. There's no getting around that. Schedule-wise, Duke, Southern Illinois, and Miami University are a cakewalk out of conference schedule, so bank 3 wins in. Illinois and Nebraska are toss-ups, and Northwestern always wins 1 game it shouldn't every year. I don't think this game will go bowling again, but it will be improved over last year, maybe 5-7. All right, are you ready, folks? Let's talk Ohio State. When you go 11-2 and win the Rose Bowl, most people would consider that a phenomenal season. And it was, but for one thing. And, to quote our president, you know the thing. Their fans won't even say the thing, but you know the thing. And because of the thing, now this is a program on a mission. And it should be, because this was definitely the most beatable Buckeye team I can remember seeing in a long time last year. Yes, they had the 2 losses, but this defense also kept a lot of games way closer than they should have been. Minnesota hung around all week 1 up until the end of the game. The Penn State game was way too close considering how pitiful Penn State's offense was last year. Nebraska was making a comeback in the second half, and yeah, they won the Rose Bowl, but Utah hung 45 points on them while they were doing it. Good news is they have the offense. C.J. Stroud really didn't get going until week 4, but man, once he got his feet under him, he was brilliant. 4,400 yards, 44 touchdowns with 6 picks, completing 72% of his throws. Unfortunately, he loses Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and their 25 combined touchdowns to the NFL, but Ohio State always has their next elite receiver ready to go. Trayvon Henderson. Go back and watch my preview from last year. This guy had nothing on video except for his high school years, but I said, watch this kid. He's going to be the next great Buckeye running back, just the insane amount of speed that he has. And I was absolutely right. 1,255 yards and 15 touchdowns, along with 312 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns on top of it. The offensive line was fantastic in pass protection and great for the ground game. Now it gets back enough talent to be fantastic again. You've got 3 future NFL players on that offensive line. The defense is bringing in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State to coordinate. Great pick there, great hire. He's going to move the team to a 4-2-5 alignment, which will place a whole lot more emphasis on defending the pass, which is good because Oregon, Utah, and that team completely murdered them through the air. Denzel Burke needs to step up at corner and become the future NFL talent everyone seems to think he is. Schedule-wise, it's Ohio State. You know the teams that can give them trouble. They'll absolutely murder Notre Dame at home in the opener. They'll run roughshod through their next 4 opponents until they have to go to Michigan State on the road. That's always dangerous, but I think the Spartans losing Kenneth Walker will make the difference in that game. At Penn State, I'd usually rank that a 50-50 game, but these are not Penn State's best years. That leaves the game as the only game they could conceivably lose, and it's at home, and they're on a mission. Don't be surprised if this team brings righteous vengeance down on that team this season and caps off a perfect 12-0 run. There's that much talent. Let's talk Penn State. Boy, what a funk this team is in. All those years sitting near the top of the Big Ten with James Franklin, all the top 5 rankings, being in a position to knock off conference title contenders, actually winning a Big Ten title that one year, all the New Year's 6 bowl appearances, winning the Cotton Bowl, winning the Fiesta Bowl. But over the past 2 years, this team is exactly 500, 11-11. Where has it all gone wrong, especially considering they basically own all recruiting in the northeastern United States? That's all in the offense. James Franklin is known as a coach who loves a high-octane attack, never lets off the gas pedal, runs up the score, and over the past couple of years, he just hasn't had the talent to execute it. Sean Clifford is as vanilla a dink-and-dunk quarterback as you'll ever see, which doesn't set him apart that much from Penn State quarterbacks of the past, but the quarterbacks of the past also had guys like Miles Sanders and Saquon Barkley, superstar running backs in the Big Ten mold that made sure they didn't have to do too much except be a handoff delivery system with a helmet. There's not that guy in this Penn State lineup. There's not that guy that you have to account for and put men on every time he's on the field because he's a threat to break a play for 30 yards every time he touches the ball. Last year's leading running back, Kevon Lee, barely broke 500 yards in 13 games. He's good for 4 yards a run. That's not going to get it done in the Big Ten with all these stout defenses up front. Someone needs to step up and become a playmaker. Look for Mitchell Tinsley, the 14-touchdown transfer from Western Kentucky, to be the best bet for a new weapon for Clifford. The defense wasn't dominant, but it was okay. It only allowed more than 24 points twice, and once came in the 33-24 loss to Ohio State, and the other time was to Michigan State, so there's no real shame there. The secondary was much better than the front 7, and if this team is going to compete in the Big Ten East with quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud and Peyton Thorne, they're going to have to continue to be so. The secondary does have a star in Joey Porter, and Jair Brown is the team's leading returning tackler with 74 stops. They're going to be fine. The secondary is going to be fine. The linebacking core loses leading tacklers Ellis Brooks and Brandon Smith, and now Curtis Jacobs has to be the star of the bunch after making 61 tackles with 3 sacks last year. Schedule-wise, it is never easy to compete in the Big Ten East. It's so stacked year after year. This year's schedule is brutal early, and then it lets up late in the year. Going to Purdue and Auburn in the first 3 weeks, one of those games is going to be a loss. Going to Michigan is likely a loss. Ohio State, Michigan State, and Minnesota are all at home. This team's always sneaky good against Ohio State, and both of the other 2 games are going to be a rock fight. I think they might be able to sneak away from that batch with 2 wins. Everything else should be a cakewalk if the offense can actually get going. No reason this team can't improve to 8-4 this year. Look for them to knock off a team they shouldn't. I feel like they always do. The Purdue Boilermakers. What a pleasant surprise this team was last year. When they knocked off number 2 Iowa and then number 5 Michigan State right afterwards, I honestly thought they might have a shot of taking down Ohio State with how beatable they clearly were last year. No such luck. That was C.J. Stroud's coming out game. Still, they had a very respectable year, and they won a thriller of a Music City Bowl against Tennessee. Aiden O'Connell was great under center, threw for over 3,700 yards and 28 touchdowns, but he has 2 big losses this year in his top 2 receivers, David Bell and Milton Wright. Tight end Payne Durham is going to get a lot of looks. He averaged 10.5 yards a catch. That's great for a tight end. For 6 touchdowns last year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the offense is catered to him, as the Boilermakers they just have no run game to speak of. The defense looked great, except anytime it went up against an elite offense, and there are precious few of them in the Big Ten West, and Purdue gets to miss Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State from the East, so that actually might work out to their benefit. Going to Wisconsin and Minnesota, both of those games are going to suck, but Iowa is a home game, coming off a 2-week break. If they don't have to deal with any back-to-back away dates at all this year, and it only leaves the state of Indiana twice after October 1st. No reason this team can't be in the mix in the West. This should be a 7 or 8 win team again easily. Let's talk my alma mater, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. A disappointing 5-7 regular season for Greg Schiano. Man, that Northwestern loss hurt so bad. I really thought that was the game that was going to get them back to a bowl game for the first time in 7 years, and it really should have been. As it is, they did get backdoored into the Gator Bowl against an unstoppable Wake Forest team and got absolutely massacred. The 5 wins last year were massive, considering the program won a total of 13 games in the 6 years between 2015 and 2020. Rutgers went very, very heavy in the transfer portal in the offense and have a 4-star quarterback prospect in Gavin Williams, just waiting to be ready to take over full-time. But for now, the job is still Noah Vedrals, the transfer from Nebraska. He has not set the world on fire under center, and I don't see that getting much better here in his 6th year. Leading rusher Isaiah Pacheco is done, but second leading running back Kyle Monagai is back after going for 235 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Aaron Young is a pretty decent veteran who ran for 205 yards and 5 touchdowns. This is a team with basically a whole new offensive line through the transfer portal, and it needs it. We'll see how well they all gel together. The defense allowed close to 400 yards per game and was the worst in the Big Ten in pass efficiency. Coming in to help matters is Joe Harris-Symiak from Minnesota as the new defensive coordinator. He's going to have his work cut out for him. The defensive front, they suffer from a significant lack of size, and they get bullied around by a lot of opposing offenses. This team generated virtually no pass rush on anyone last year. That has to get better, but I just don't see the size there to get it done right away. Help's going to have to come from stronger recruiting classes. This team's out-of-conference game is Boston College in the Power 5. That's going to suck. That's probably a loss. At Ohio State, at Minnesota, at Michigan State, probably all be losses. That's not counting the home games against Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan. Again, all probably losses. This team needs to beat Wagner, Temple, and Indiana at home, get that 50-50 game against Nebraska, and probably steal one from Maryland on the road at the end of the year just to match last year's win total. A bowl game is still not in the cards unless the quarterback situation gets sorted out a lot better and a lot faster than anyone expected, and everyone young on this team steps up in a big way. Oh, okay, I'm starting to get a headache. This was a long preview. Let's wrap it up with the Wisconsin Badgers. This team was a meme for college football bettors last year, just auto under the total, even if it was in the high 30s. There was a stretch of about 7 weeks in the middle of the season once they hit conference play against the Big Ten West where their opponents just couldn't do a thing against them. The defense was just so crushing, dominated almost everyone. But they just dug themselves too big a hole in the beginning of the season. They lost to Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan, opened the season 1-3. They could never catch Iowa, so you kind of felt like, what was the point? The team's biggest problem was that its quarterback did not make the second-year jump everyone was hoping for. His accuracy backslid, he made some ill-advised throws, and he wound up with more interceptions than touchdowns. Hardly mattered, as the Badgers had Braylon Allen and his 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns to power them through when they needed it. Allen's still there, and his wingman Ches Malusi is going to be back from injury, so there's a baseline level of offense and scoring you can expect. It's all up to Graham Mertz. He was specifically brought to Wisconsin to balance out the offense and add a passing attack. He has the weapons. He has the running backs to sell out the play action. It's all on him to grow into the quarterback he has the potential to be. They might take a step back from last year on defense, as they do have to replace 3 of the starters in the secondary, but the front 7 should be a brick wall against the run and generate a great pass rush from its linebacker core. There are just too many superstar players still around to spotlight any one guy on defense. Looking at the schedule, the Wazoo date in Week 2 is going to be interesting with the Badgers trying to replace their secondary, but I'd still give Wisconsin the dupe in that one. At Ohio State to open conference play is a sure loss, and it kicks off a brutal stretch of 3 road games in 4 weeks. At Iowa is tough, Purdue is 50-50, and closing it out against Minnesota is probably a close loss. 7-5 or 8-4 I think is realistic. There's just too much improvement among the top tier of the West this year for them to really challenge for it. And there you go. The 14 teams of what, for my money, is the best conference top to bottom in terms of total amount of elite talent in college football. It's obviously going to be who can stop Ohio State in the East, and Iowa and Minnesota should duke it out in the West, with that head-to-head matchup towards the end of the year being critical. We saved the SEC for last. We always do. I will do my level best to get the preview out before this Saturday. Are you getting excited? Football season is right around the corner. I'm so stoked. I can't wait. I will see you next time.